to listen to their concerns and how working people, really the working poor, are struggling. And I'd like to yield as much time as the gentleman from Minnesota needs to cover his points at this time.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that the congressman from Nevada, my friend Steve Horsford and Hakeem Jeffries, doing an awesome job. I'm so proud to see you gentlemen holding forth about the issues that affect this whole country and things that the Congressional Black Caucus, of which we're all members, are doing. And I also just want to let people know who may be tuned in, Mr. Speaker, that, you know, there are people in this Congress who believe that hard work should be rewarded, who believe that when people get up in the morning, pound it out all day to put food on the table for their families, that it is nothing less than an insult for somebody else who's living in plenty to look back on them and say, you're not working hard enough, you're not doing quite enough. The fact is, sometimes hard-working people need the help of their government. There's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. Lord knows Apple Computer agrees that sometimes hard-working people need the help of their government. The fact of the matter is that we did have a hearing, and that hearing did involve low-wage workers, people making $7, $8, $8.25 an hour, some of whom were working for contractors who had contracts with the federal government. People who were literally working in buildings like the Union Station, like the Reagan Building, federal buildings across Washington, but also across this country, who were not working for the federal government, but were working for contractors who had contractors with the federal government, paying them $7 and $8 an hour, a wage that's not livable, not sustainable. You know, folks often speak derisively, Mr. Speaker, about low-income folks. Why don't they make more money? What's wrong with them? Well, they're working 8 hours a day. They're working 8 hours a week. You know, they're working 3 jobs, but they can still barely put food on the table, and they're raising their children. And they need food stamps, and if we cut the food stamp budget by $20 billion, we're going to be cutting families who work hard 2-3 jobs every day. You know, I've heard my Republican friends talk about this culture of dependency. Somehow, that moral judgment, you know, the good book says, judge not, lest ye be judged, you know.
Will the gentleman yield for a moment? What's ironic about the culture of dependency is they never talk about it when we bring up corporate welfare or corporate entitlements. If we really want to talk about entitlements and who's depending upon government, then let's put it all on the table, and the billions of dollars that go to special interests, but yet we want to take away services for poor, needy children, families, the elderly, and the disabled. That's really the comparison?
Gentleman's absolutely right. I mean, it is utter hypocrisy to sit up here and talk about the culture of dependency and not talk about corporate welfare. You know, me and Senator Bernie Sanders, an awesome gentleman, by the way, have a bill called In Corporate Welfare Act, in which we identify $110 billion worth of corporate giveaways to big oil, big coal, and big natural gas. Now, look, these are industries that are making record profits. ExxonMobil is not having any trouble. Why do they need the American people's money? Why do they need a subsidy? Well, they're getting one, and yet people in this very body are willing to stand back and say, poor folks working 3-4 jobs need to have their money cut. I mean, it is astounding. It's shocking how hypocritical some of the things that we see go on are. But I just want to say this, Mr. Speaker. You know, this is a country of, by, and for the people. It's a country designed to let the voice of the people be heard. And yet sometimes the people's voice is muted because it's so difficult for the average person to take off time, to come down here, to talk about what they want to talk about, to be able to access their government. And so this is times when you and Mr. Jeffries can come down here and talk about the importance of food stamps, of TRIO, and talk about the absolute concentration of wealth at the very tip top of the economic stream in this country. I mean, I'm going to wrap up here, Mr. Horsford, but I just want to wrap up by saying this. Working people across this country need to know that when poverty increases, the money just doesn't disappear. It goes to the very top of the economy. And that's why since about 2008, if you look at the newly created wealth in this economy, about 93% of it went to the top 1%. Now, my friends in the Republican caucus believe that rich people don't have enough money and poor people have too much, which is why they want to cut food stamps and cut taxes for the richest people. One of them even said to me one time, Keith, a poor person has never given me a job. Like, wow, that's the attitude we're dealing with. The bottom line is, Mr. Horford, is that low-income workers are taking matters into their own hands. Low-income workers in Detroit, in Chicago, in New York, in St. Louis, even here in Washington, D.C., have come together and said and had strikes, even McDonald's workers, in order to get better pay. Now, they are brave and they're courageous. They're taking their families' needs into their own hands. We wish them the best. We had a hearing so that they could let their voices be heard. But if we had a functioning National Labor Relations Board, would they need to go on strike and risk their jobs? If we had a social safety net, would they be in such dire straits? If we made sure that American workers had an increase in the minimum wage and we were paying a livable wage, would they be in this situation? The American people are standing up for a better life, but the truth is public policy is failing them, and we have got to do better. We can start by getting rid of sequester and getting rid of this very bad idea of cutting $20 billion out of supplemental nutrition. I'll yield back to the gentleman, and again, thank you for